Hello and welcome to our Teach It Forward webinar series with GradeCam. Thank you for registering and joining. My name is Debbie Delaney. I'm our Executive VP of Sales at GradeCam, and we are extremely happy to have our presenters here today. We have Principal James Alshire and lead teacher Chris Downs from North Hagerstown High School, located in Washington County, Maryland. And they're going to be presenting today on how they had captured data within GradeCam and put that data to use within their school climate as well as in their PLCs. James and Chris, they have traveled the country training schools on the IB program. They have taken 2 of their schools in the district and have got credentials for 2 of those schools. Also, they have put 2 of their schools and working on a 3rd through the AVID program for authentication through the AVID program. So we appreciate that. And would you please enter any questions into either the chat or the question section? And if you could also help us out and let us know maybe what the role is at your school. This will have a little bit of an administrative focus, so you can kind of share with us what your role is there. I'll do my best to answer your questions, but we will be pausing throughout the presentation a few times where if I can't answer your question, we'll go ahead and present those to James and Chris. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. James Alshire and Mr. Chris Downs.
Thanks, Debbie. Welcome, everyone. We're glad you're here, and we're happy to share our story about how GradeCam's kind of helped us dig into our PLC model and what data we've been able to pull out of it. So just really quickly, I think a good important thing to know is, you know, in the state of Maryland, things like student learning objectives and of course the ever popular MSDE report card data guides what we do here. And so, you know, as a school and as a system, we're trying to find ways that, you know, teachers can have the most information possible to inform instruction in their classrooms. All of our information, you know, as you see, combines percentages to form teachers, schools, and districts' effectiveness. So, you know, the better ability that we have to track data, the more efficient a teacher can become. One of the big problems that we've had, and we'll talk about this a little later, is many of the reports that we get are so lagging that the information isn't really useful to the teacher in a timely manner. So one of the really positive benefits to us using the GradeCam platform is that we've been able to get that timely feedback that we've really been missing. Our high stakes testing looks a little bit like this in different subjects. Algebra 1 and English 10, government, and then science covers biology and chemistry topics. And again, our district, we went from kind of a data rich to a data poor environment. We don't really have necessarily a great data warehouse that exists. So really, we've our building has really kind of tried to replicate that in some way. And we've found that doing that with GradeCam and the various reports that exist has really helped our teachers and our kids.
Yeah, why GradeCam matters, I guess, from my perspective as the principal of the building, is really to be able to have rich conversations, not only with teachers, but with students as well. You know, I stumbled upon GradeCam as a result of a teacher who signed up for a free trial basis that was on a blog post. You know, she shared with me what GradeCam was and how she was using it. She was using it at the time, it was 10 questions that you could get for free. She invited me into her classroom to show me what she was doing, how she was providing feedback back to students, but I'm also getting feedback for herself to inform her instruction. And I saw the immediate benefit And when I weighed what the cost of GradeCam was to what I was using and what my teachers were using in the old form of the green Scantron sheets, it was a no-brainer for me, because it was important that we could get information back to students in a timely manner. But not only do we want to give back to students in a timely fashion, we wanted teachers to be able to use it to inform their instruction immediately. We talk about tier 3, tier 2, and tier 1 levels of intervention, and I believe that GradeCam can support in each of those tiers for students and for teachers. Pushback at the time, I would say, was minimal pushback, and probably because the reason it was minimal pushback is I stopped purchasing the Scantron sheets and said we were going to make the transition and go forward with GradeCam. Were there any barriers, I think, going into this? Probably, if there was any barrier going into it at the time, it was the professional development. And the professional development was aided tremendously by GradeCam and their customer service. We didn't have a level for a district-wide push at the time, but we did, from a school level, we definitely saw the benefit of it. We shared it with other schools, shared it with other teachers, and then kind of brought it forward with others using it. The other push that we had was it was important that we kind of use the theory of redundancy when we talk about GradeCam. We incorporate GradeCam and I would say in all of our professional development. When we think of ways to be able to get data, we think of how can we use GradeCam to inform instruction? How can we use GradeCam to be able to capture the data that we need in our classes? So we used that process at Clear Spring when I was the principal there, and then when I moved into a new position as the principal at North Hagerstown High School, we went through the exact same process for implementation, and it seemed to work. Of course, you have people who at first that don't want to move. But I think as we continue to use the program, we continue to talk about how we were using it, we continue to inform instruction, we continue to have conversations within our PLCs, we had more and more traction in it, and it kind of just spread throughout the building. It is, and as it says on the slide, this is how we do business. It's what we use in each of our PLCs, and not only in our 4 cores, because I know a lot will stick and say, well, the 4 cores. We actually use it in all of our areas. Probably one of the areas that bought into it the easiest was our career technology education field with industry standard tests. Those tests are usually pretty long. So to be able to get that feedback in a timely manner and to be able to troubleshoot with students quickly, this was a way that we could do that. And it was important for us to be able to get that information.
And the other thing to note was before Mr. Alshire got to North High, our CFIT meetings or our PLCs were organized by class period. They weren't organized by content area. So really what you get, although the horizontal teaming was kind of nice, you really couldn't really dig into the content like data that we needed to. So even having that structure in place gave us a platform to be able to have something like this and the reports that we can get to begin those discussions, because before it was kind of more general strategies rather than looking at real actionable data. So that was actually thing one. And the other piece is too, Debbie and Eric, we joke all the time that, we can call them and they'll be right back to us. But, things that we see, our teachers now are getting to the point where, they're using the platform enough that they're suggesting to us, hey, could you call them and see if they can do this? So our teachers really are interacting with it and really using the benefits of it.
And probably now in the situation where we are, and I think most systems in regard to distance learning, GradeCam is a critical piece for us in distance learning. We have a lot who are still using GradeCam, even though students aren't in the building. We are still able to use the student portal to push out and to be able to gather data to inform our instruction and to work with kids.
So before we continue, Debbie, does anybody have any questions essentially about where we started or?
We don't have any questions right now, Chris. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
So our real change for us was our professional learning communities. Chris kind of alluded to that a little bit. But the idea of our professional learning communities really we needed to change the process with which we were meeting, and we also needed to change the process with the conversations we were having. We needed our focus on teaching and learning to really be focused in the classroom, and what could we do to make changes in a timely fashion within our instruction, but also within the learning of what the students were getting. One of the first things that we established and created was we created common assessments. Not only did we create common assessments, but we created common assessments that were based on standards. The nice part was that the standards were already loaded, so we could actually link the standards to the questions that we chose. And then we could, as a professional learning community, as groups, we could sit down and we could really talk about what do our kids know and what do they not know? Why is it that my students are achieving in this class, but they're not achieving here? What's the difference? What was going on within instruction in the 2 different rooms, or 3 different rooms, or 4 different rooms? And that was really, really important for us.
So, and for me as a lead teacher, one of my jobs is to kind of onboard new teachers and new teachers to the building. And, as a former English teacher, I clearly am not well-versed in math subjects, but at the same time, I was able to use actionable information and have conversations specific to other subject areas and other content areas with new teachers and teachers new to our building who were just trying to find their way. So for me, being a non-evaluative mentor, it's a way for me to get into classrooms, and it's a way for me to have conversations based on something that isn't conjecture or very subjective. You can have a conversation with a new teacher saying, hey, listen, what kinds of things are you doing here? Or what are you doing that's working well that teacher X, who's been here for a good amount of time, isn't getting? So it works both ways, and being able to see both sides of that is really helpful for someone in my position who, I rely on teachers seeking me out, or Mr. Alshire saying, get into that classroom because we need some assistance. So having that information at our fingertips was really important to me.
And we put the bridge projects on here because this was really, when bridge projects came about, and there were new projects that we had to use. The scoring there was an immense amount of scoring that teachers needed to do by hand. And we looked at it, and the more I heard from teachers and the more we talked to teachers, I remember calling Chris, in his office, and I said, hey, can you come over? I got something I want to talk to you about. And it was about taking the bridge projects, creating answer sheets that would give scores back to the teachers on what the students were doing with the bridge projects, and we could also keep it in a very secure environment. It was a gigantic time saver for our math teachers, and it was something that we needed. We had an enormous amount of bridge projects, and it was something that was stressful at the time, and we needed to find a way to be able to support and to help. And GradeCam was one of those ways which we did it. Chris and the department leader, our math department leader, worked on putting it together. They worked on renumbering some things, but it really allowed us to be able to give some time back to teachers. And that's probably one of the things that I kind of advocate with the use of GradeCam is it does give time back to teachers and allows them to focus on their content and on their instruction, and students can focus on the learning of the content, and they can get immediate feedback on what's going on in the classroom. And that's critical for me.
And the other piece, just to back up a second, so in the state of Maryland, in case people aren't familiar, bridge projects are items that kids work on that the kids have not been able to pass their assessments required for graduation. So the state of Maryland creates projects for them to do in each of the subject areas, and the amount of time spent on those and the outcome of those is equivalent to them then passing their assessment. So they get credit. The requirement is that they have to have failed the test twice. They can begin working on the project on a parallel path with repeating the assessment until the project is accepted, i.e. they run out of time before graduation. So that's where the bridge project come in. And so Mr. Alshire mentioned, we've done a lot of work here at North High to get us from where we were 5 years ago to where we are now. And we have an image to show you here in a little bit, but it doesn't happen overnight. Teachers don't just say, okay, I'm going to use data now and we're going to have meaningful PLCs, but the stepping stones in place and hiring the right people and making sure that our goal as a staff is to help kids. I think what we were missing the whole time was a vehicle to do that. And now that we have the majority of the staff on board, our PLC meetings are now centralized and everybody brings data to it. And using it rather than just having it is kind of that critical piece that I know we've worked hard here to develop. Like Mr. Alshire said, I've worked with the English and math teams and we've developed assessments that are based on those exams. And that real-time feedback is big for kids. So when our teachers are issuing, we have in our district, for lack of a better term, they're called benchmarks that we give in the interim period. And essentially what we had kids do was double bubble with GradeCam while they were taking those assessments. And so we set up those answer sheets and instructions so that kids could do that. And what happened was we got the immediate feedback. We didn't have to wait for the platform that we were using to give us scores. And plus we were also able to assess things in a more timely manner that we wouldn't have been able to, even some writing components to that. The kids really noticed a difference in how quickly teachers were adjusting and how they got feedback to them. So that's kind of the piece that when you have the kids even buying in saying, hey, I really liked the fact that I got this right away and I knew what my mistakes were, rather than waiting a couple weeks right before the test or right before they had to perform. Maybe if you want to talk about that, I think.
The GradeCam method.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably one of the things, I think the first bullet point when it says, our PLC meetings are now centralized and held with data. I think that is probably the most important piece for me. Sometimes we have meetings for the sake of having meetings, and going into a meeting and letting teachers look at their results with other teachers creates some really, really rich discussion. And that is how instruction changes. That's how you change culture within the building that you have, because it's teachers who are coming up with the ideas. It's not someone who is sitting in an office or walking around the building checking in, on walkthroughs and things like that. But you have teachers who are coming up with ideas about instruction and asking each other questions. And that's a game changer, not only with your teachers, but also with kids as well. So responding immediately to kids is important. I walked into an AP calculus room, and I'll never forget the time that I was in a room and I was observing a teacher. It was an AP calculus teacher. She was given a 5-question quiz test, whatever you want to call it. And I can remember she was walking around the room and she was scanning, and she would go back and look at number 3 and 4, go back and look at number 2 and 3. And she just continued to walk around the room and talk around the room and walk around the room. But it was constant feedback to kids about what they didn't get yet. The intent of her lesson was she wanted her kids to understand the content. It wasn't about the score, but it was a way that she could get to every kid in a timely fashion, respond to them, and to get them information back. Kids left that classroom with a smile on their face. They could go home in the evening and say, what did you learn today? And they could go through everything that they learned in 5 minutes because of the abilities that teachers have with the tool.
And, for me, working with teachers on a more of a collegial basis, the conversations I can have are just increase exponentially, because if a teacher's struggling or if a teacher's saying their kids aren't getting it, my first question is, how do you know? Because a lot of times the feedback and the assessment piece isn't as prevalent as it needs to be, because it takes time. And so having something that they can get feedback, like James was just saying, having something that they can get feedback, that's my first go-to. How have you gotten an exit ticket, or how have you gotten an entrance ticket? How are you assessing them? Are you asking them? Are you giving them feedback? How are you giving them feedback? And we all know that takes time. And the other thing that, one of my main jobs is to try and save teachers time. So how is that helping? Ultimately, I don't want new teachers staying at school till 6 o'clock every day. I don't want them coming in at 6 a.m. So what kinds of things can I do to help them contribute to their PLCs and bring data and really have them show that they're contributing members? I kind of want to just flash forward to this picture a little bit, because this is one of our English PLCs. And many of you as GradeCam users will know these reports look very familiar that you can see on the table. But this is what we do. And, one of the things that we're also able to see is teachers actually can come in and make themselves a little vulnerable and ask the right questions. Because I know James wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, this was a pretty powerful meeting for us as an English department and as a team. You can see we all have the same results, and it was a vulnerable time, because the results that we had were not only the results that we had of our classes individually, but they were also our results as a collective group. And the discussion in this meeting was just incredible. Enough so that we even questioned, is what I have held on to always at the crux of what I think I should be teaching? Is it what I should be teaching? And it was just an incredible aha moment. And the meeting, I think we were probably 35 or 40 minutes in the meeting, and we could have taken 1,000 sound bites from the discussion and from the meeting of things that were just incredible moments. And every person at the table talked about kids, talked about data, talked about instruction, and talked about changes. We came up with ideas that would drive instruction in our building that would benefit kids. And that was a very, very, it's powerful. And I don't think we could, I know, I shouldn't say I don't think, I know that we would not have that discussion without the results that we have that are right in front of us. And so that was, to me, this picture really kind of captures the essence and the importance of why we use GradeCam, what the importance is for us, and how it has reshaped our PLC meetings. Our PLC meetings used to be, we would get together and we would talk about, hey, I taught this, or let's try this, or let's do this, but we weren't really digging into what we needed to dig into. So this was a process. It didn't happen overnight, but it's where we are now, and it's where we're going to continue to go. I would say the same thing. We could take a snapshot of our math department, and it would be kind of the exact same thing you would see going on within their PLC when they're discussing and talking about kids and data and content.
So, and just to wrap up, I wanted, the other thing is, because as many of you use GradeCam already, some of the key reports that we use and that we try to access with teachers, and particularly new teachers, the teacher by grade level always gives us the reports by standards, anything with standards tied to them, because that's where we get the bang for our buck, because where we've had success is pairing teachers with other teachers who are successful with that particular indicator and saying, hey, why are you successful with this? What are you doing? And as James alluded to, one of the biggest successes that I've seen in my conversations with teachers, and part of my job is to point them to the right resources. So giving them to a teacher who does something particularly well, and for them to be able to say, hey, how'd you do that? Because I'm struggling with this. Those are really helpful for us. And of course, James and I, with school reporting mode, we can go in and kind of see that and head some of those things off at the pass after we give assessments. And we work with the department leaders to do that as well. If red flags stick up, I'm able to go have some pointed conversations. But it generally speaking, any of those things by teacher, by standard, and even looking at it by class. One of our calculus teachers actually did one of his AP practice exams on GradeCam and actually pinpointed a question, because he has 2 different class periods. He pinpointed a question that his 4th period did really well on, and his 1st period did not. So he looked at that, and that was his aha moment. He said, what the heck am I doing 4th period that I'm not doing 1st period? So those kinds of things were really helpful for us in just pointing them in the right direction. So Debbie, I don't know are there any questions out there at this point?
Yes, there are several. One of the questions are, how did you foster a positive data culture with your teachers? I've got about 4 good questions here, so
Okay.
I'll give you that one first.
I would say the first thing, and probably the most important thing, that I think you have to in the role of a principal, you have to think about everything and you have to look at everything. And ultimately, data it's important. And I say that, and if you can see my face, I got a smile on it. But you also have to create a culture with your teachers that they don't think that you're always looking over their shoulder for that gotcha moment. You can't have a gotcha moment. You can't create you can't create the discussion we had if you're there and you're thinking that everybody's looking at you as, man, look at my scores compared to your scores. I must be this or I must be that. You have to change that. Yeah, that is important. You've got to change that culture, and you've got to have having teachers have a discussion about what's going on. It can't be that you're pointing fingers at each other. And that's really, really important. And how do you do? For me, it's about relationships. It's about communication. It's about talking. It's about looking at the data. It's about questioning. It's about coming up with solutions. It's real easy to look at what the issue is and just say, well, this, or this, and come up with 1,000 excuses. I think we're really good at coming up with excuses. But what about coming up with solutions? Is there something I need to do to support you? Is there something that I can have Chris come in to support you? Is there something that we as a team can support each other on? Out of this discussion, we talked about the need for, this is our 10th grade team. So we talked about the need of what we needed our 9th grade team to do, our 9th grade English teachers to do, to set the table for our 10th grade students and our 10th grade teachers for the next year. But not only did we talk about that, we talked about, hey, you know what? These kids that are in 10th grade are going to go to 11th grade. So what are the things that we know we need them to understand and be able to do? That's a bigger discussion. That's a bigger conversation. But we came up with solutions. Yep, we wrestled with the tough stuff. I mean, we had teachers who were like, if they could have taken their pencil and grinded it through the table, they would have. And we even stopped in the middle of the meeting. We're like, look, you're angry scratching on that paper. Don't. Like, this is a discussion. Let's talk. And you've got to read the room, and you've got to have that discussion. And I think that's really important. So I hope I answered that question.
That's great. I'm going to piggyback one. This is from Melissa Walker. She wanted to know, how is GradeCam included in all teacher professional developments?
I'll let Chris answer that. I think.
So essentially what we do at the beginning of every year, any of our new teachers that come in, I run a session on sort of the basics. And what that does is that does two things. Number one, it shows them how to get started with it. And the other thing is then it allows me to get back into their classrooms at some point in time because, teachers that are new to our building sometimes get really overwhelmed with other things. So it always gives me an opportunity to get back in there if they're hesitant to reach out. The other thing is throughout the year, we have certain principal-led days and supervisor-led days. And during this, well, for lack of a better term, mess that we've all been going through right now, we've been doing pop-in PD sessions where we've been really hammering student portal right now. So each Friday, I host a kind of a pop-in when teachers have questions or how do I get started with this, or I'm doing an assessment, how do I use student portal? So throughout the year during those principal-led days, we'll just have, through our conversations and, my observations of PLCs through the course of the year, we'll kind of set up different focused PD sessions throughout the year to keep it fresh in everybody's mind.
And we also, the other thing I think is important is, Chris doesn't have classes assigned to him. And of course, I don't have classes assigned to me, but we do have teachers who have classes assigned to them of students. So we lean on our teachers to be professional developers as well. The best professional development comes from someone who's still doing the work. So we have a super, super talented staff, and we lean on them to help with professional development. As of right now, we're running professional development every Friday in distance learning, and we just have some incredibly talented teachers in our building who are just doing an incredible job with leading the professional development that supports teachers and instruction. And we also have narrowed the scope of what it is. We have said GradeCam for the entire time that I've been here as a principal as this is how we do business. This is a tool that we use. So if you don't continue to have professional development with the tool and you don't continue to talk about it and how you use it, that's where I think you have some of the issues. So it's always at the forefront for us anytime we have professional development. Hey, we have a beginner session, we have an intermediate session, we have an advanced session. Hey, somebody brought some really good ideas about how you could use GradeCam to do this, or this, and we'll put that information out there. So that's how we make sure that we incorporate it all the time.
Okay, thank you. Another question, and this kind of goes back, I think it's a little bit more of a statement from Michael Blum. You know, teachers are very guarded and concerned about their teaching practice. You addressed this a little bit. How did you prepare teachers for being vulnerable um, to the results in their classes? And I think you talked about that around your not making it a gotcha moment and looking for solutions collectively. But if you had anything additional to share, but the questions are rolling in, just to let you know, several.
I would say the other thing, yeah, I always equate it this way. And I knew, so when I first became a principal and I first kind of, arrived here in the building at North Hagerstown High School, um, I'm going to go to AP and AP results. You know, if we want to open the doors of access for kids, to open the doors of access for kids, you have to get the doors open by the teachers to get kids that are non-traditional kids to take upper level classes. So if everything that you're worried about is the score, and people know that that's all you're looking at as to whether what is gauging success, you will not change that conversation in the building you're in. It has to, at the forefront, it's got to be about kids, and teachers have to know that they can come to, like, I truly believe, and I may be wrong, but I think teachers know they can come and have a conversation with me, and I'm not going to turn them away. My door is always open. I very rarely am in my office, but my door is always open. And I always want to have those discussions. And I always love it when the AP scores come out, because I can tell you who the first 2 or 3 teachers are going to call me in the summer and say, AP scores are out. When do you want to sit down and talk? Do you have my results? I want to do this, this, and this. And I remember one of the discussions I had with a teacher last year. She was like, my results weren't as good as what they were last year. I said, yeah, but look, you had 2 more AP classes this year than you had last year. Let's look through the kids that you had. Do you think, are those kids better to have had you than if they wouldn't have been in your class? Now think about that question. Are those kids better to have had you than not to have taken that class at all? Is it better for them to have been challenged? Is it better for them to have been pushed? Is it better for them to have taken the test and to see where they stand than to not be challenged at all? It'd be real simple to filter it down. It'd be real simple to filter it down and say, okay, we're only going to let the kids that we think are going to get a 3, 4, or 5 take the test, but that's not reality. That's not what it is, and that's not what it is for me as a leader. And I think my staff knows that. I think they understand my philosophy on that. We believe in an open door access policy for kids in our building, which is probably why we have, over the past 2 years, we've set new records, if that's what you want to call them, with our number of kids who take AP and with our number of kids who are taking IB tests. And I'm proud of that. But not only am I proud of that, not only did we have more kids take the IB test, we had more kids score higher on the IB test last year than we did the year before. And we're going to continue that. But we do that because our teachers believe in what they're doing. And they believe in what they're doing because they're not worried about somebody looking over their shoulder, pounding away on what we didn't do. Let's talk about what we can do to get better. That's a big discussion.
Another question is, looking back as you implemented GradeCam, is there anything you would have changed, maybe enhanced with your rollout for the building, tips for new administrators?
Well, I think that, from the principal has to be involved in the process, but not only the principal. The old mindset of the principal has all the information and it's top down, and everybody follows suit. I do believe that the principal is at the top. I won't lie about that, but I also believe in I also believe in ownership, shared ownership. So all of my assistant principals understand the use of GradeCam and how we use it. All of my assistant principals are part of the PLC process. All of my assistant principals are part of the instruction in the building. All of my assistant principals are principals in waiting. But not only that, we also, and I said this before, we have a ton of talented teachers in our building. So our teachers are part of that process as well. It's shared ownership in this building. And it's got to be that. I don't think I could work in a different manner. And I'm a pretty straightforward guy as a principal. I'm a pretty straightforward principal. I like things to be my way. But I love sitting down and talking instruction with teachers. And I love being in PLC meetings and hearing solutions. And this meeting itself, I just think this was a process for us to get to, but this was a process that was worth the time and the effort.
Yeah, and again, for something like GradeCam, we don't mandate that teachers use it, but our conversations are, well, why aren't you?
Right.
I
walked into an art classroom last year. It was a first year art teacher. I remember her on the first week of school, and I remember her about midway through her first year of teaching. The first week of school, I remember walking around the building as teachers are getting ready, and she had come in to take the place of another teacher, and she was just sitting at the table, and she just had stuff all over the place. She was a new teacher. She had a room that she needed to get in order, but didn't know what she could get rid of and what she should, new teachers don't know that process. And I looked at her and I said, hey, I'll be back tomorrow. I'll have the custodians here, and we're going to get your room in order. I called my assistant principals in a group text. I shouldn't say I called, my group text them. I said, look, tomorrow we're going to be up in the art room. It's going to be us. We're going to have the custodial staff up there, and we're going to get that room in order. We can't have a first year teacher not be ready for day one, worried about storage and where she's going to put all the stuff that's always been there. And I think she's worried she's going to offend somebody if she throws something away. We're going to take care of it. We organized the entire room. I remember going into, for observation evaluation, and we were talking, and a part of the conversation, we were talking about grading and how she was assessing and all things like that. And we talked about using a rubric, a lot of different discussion. And in the midst of having the discussion, she showed me what she was doing and how she was scoring things. And I said, you're working too hard. You could be doing all this in GradeCam and uploading in your gradebook and not have to worry about it. Like, why? My mind, it was quick. Yeah, we'll use GradeCam. It's easy. But I had to remember I had someone who was brand new that didn't even really, wasn't thinking to that point yet. So I walked down to Chris. And I was like, hey, Chris, you're a lead teacher. I need you to go work with such and such. This is what we're looking for. This is what we need to do. How do we make this work? It was done. We spent time. We talked about it. We created it. He worked with the teacher on it. And that's how we do business now in an art classroom. So when I say, hey, the 4 cores, to me, art's just as important as the 4 cores, because I think everything that we do is important. But that is how you have those types of conversations, and that's how you create a culture where the tools that you want to put in front of teachers can be used and be used for the right reason. Does that answer that question?
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Lynn Lockhart, she sent several questions, and I think one of these is really, really interesting. She said, one of them is, who is developing your common assessment test questions that are tied to your required state standards? And kind of to piggyback with that, how do you prevent a teacher from reviewing the assessment questions with your students before that common assessment? So kind of twofold there.
So I'm going to answer the second question first. Does it matter if they review them prior to the test? Doesn't that mean they're teaching? I got like that. To me, if those questions that we have, that we think that are the right questions, are good questions, I don't see the problem in reviewing them. But I never get to that question with my staff. And I think that's the difference. I don't worry about that. That's the question that I think you hear all the time. Well, I'm worried that someone's going to review it and that their score is going to be better than this person's score. You know what? At the end of the day, doesn't matter. And that's really how I would answer that question. How we created the questions and what we did was we looked at samples. We looked at questions that the teachers thought were good questions. We looked at models that were out there. We found examples that we thought were good questions that tied with standards, and we used those to develop. Our Algebra 2 team was able to do that. Our Algebra 1 team was able to do that. Our Geometry team was able to do that. Our English 9, 10, 11 teams were able to come up with a common piece of literature that was a base piece of literature, and to be able to ask questions from that were similar. So we modeled and molded those as to what we thought would be good assessments that would give us timely feedback. We didn't pay a company to do it. We paid ourselves to do it. We used our expertise to be able to develop, really not knowing what the end of that path was going to be. But honestly, I again go back to that. I would go back to saying I would not believe, or I don't worry whether teachers have reviewed prior. I just don't let that be a determining factor for me as to whether our data is valid or not, because the data that we're using is used to drive instruction. So let's be honest, there could be some teachers who could review the data and the kids score poorly. What does that tell them? If that's happened and the scores are there and they're not very good, that would tell me something about maybe my instruction wasn't that great to begin with. And now I'm in a group where we're all together. Let's talk about how I can get better.
The other part of that question was who's developing the common assessment test questions tied to your standards?
Yep, we do it with the teachers. We do it as a team. So our teachers will meet as a group. So we have three or four Algebra 2 teachers. So we try to set up some time at the end of each school year that we not only can we reflect on what we taught, but we also kind of set up some additional time with our teams that we can look at setting up common assessments as a group.
Plus, also we have access to a platform called Previ that actually provides MCAP-like assessments for English and math. So that's a company that we use, and we're able to access the material that we can then develop answer sheets for using GradeCam. So that's the other platform that we're able to use.
And if you take public release items, and I think I've said this before, math teachers that are out there, may have heard this before, but math teachers are pretty, and I'll say math teachers, but math teachers are pretty smart. And what I would say is they're great with creating problems, and it's the functions of the math problem. So if you take some of the variables out and you load new variables in, it may be a good problem that you could use multiple times, and you're just adding new variables. Why are we recreating the wheel every time? It's about the process. My days of math, and I'm hopeful that not anybody else is doing this anymore, but when I was a high school student and I was in math, I was doing 30 or 40 problems a night because they said I needed practice. Practice was going to make me better. But I practiced 30 times wrong. So did I get better or did I get worse? And so that's important for me. I want our kids to get better. I don't want our kids practicing bad things over and over and over again. And I would say the same thing. I was a former English teacher. There are certain things that we hold near and dear to our heart that we think every kid should read. But I also question sometimes, why do they have to read some of those certain things? And so that's kind of my philosophical discussion on that, I guess, a little bit.
All right, we have this is kind of another twofold question from a long time GradeCam user, Mike Carney, who's actually done some blog posts for us about his usage with GradeCam. He said, it's kind of two parts. Did your students understand the benefits of GradeCam for them specifically? And have you seen an increase in student task completion using GradeCam?
So I'll give an example, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris. So this year, for us to be able to get some information, Chris talked a little bit about the double bubbling to be able to get results. I had an important person from our central office come over. We walked around the building, and it was a day that we were giving a common assessment in our math classes. We walked into a classroom, and I remember his conversation. He, talked to a student, and he said, "Hey, can you tell me what you're doing? I'm taking this test." The student said, and he said, "So why are you taking this test? And why do you have to do it on two different platforms?" One was paper, one was on his Chromebook. And he said, "Well, this one I have to submit, and this one Miss Such and Such is going to score, and I'm going to know immediately what my results are. I'm going to know how I did." And he was like, "Well, is that important to you?" And the student was like, "Well, yeah. How am I supposed to get better if I don't know what I don't know?" And that came from a kid. So do I? Yeah, I mean, I would think our engagement as a result is really important. I mean,
Yeah, and I think just even from a pattern in class where we were saying a lot of our teachers use exit tickets and entrance tickets, and it's a good jumping off point. But also when you're looking at assessments, and when you, particularly in the student portal, when you hit submit, you know exactly where you stand. So people are able to triage right away. And kids like that. The other thing, kids really like bringing their papers up and scanning their own stuff and seeing how they did. So it is popular, and it's becoming a pretty, I use the word normal, but it's a pretty normal way of life for kids. And even some of them will ask, "Well, hey, can we do this? Can I scan this so I know what I have?" Because it is about feedback. They want it.
Yeah, kids want to know. I mean, I think back to the time when we were all in school. I mean, you could take a test on Friday, but not get the results to the following Friday. But the teacher taught Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I got my test from last week on Friday. The following week, am I gaining any information from that, or am I just getting a score? To me, you're just getting a score because I've already moved on. There is no intervention that occurs there. There's nothing that has happened as a result. And so I would agree with Chris.
Another question we had from Carolyn: did she understand that teachers use GradeCam for other things besides benchmark assessments, like classroom assessments and exit tickets? Do teachers tie those back also to standards?
Some do, yes.
Yeah, the majority of teachers do, I'd say. To say that we use standards for every assessment wouldn't be appropriate, because there are many other features, observational tools, things like that our teachers use. But yeah, not everything's tied to standards. But when we need to have those discussions, and when teachers need to see a growth of progression over time, for example, we have a lot of teachers that use, I can think of a math teacher and a science teacher specifically that use GradeCam to have their student learning outcome conversations with Mr. Alshire, and they use it to track progress in certain standards. So yeah.
Okay, another question is, what is the size and demographic of your school? And also with this, could you provide what your costs were relative to Scantron? This was also asked. Same person, a good friend, Michael Blum, was wanting to know those questions.
So I'll go on the cost factor alone. For me, for the time when we did it, the cost factor to me was the green sheets that go through the Scantron are very specific to the machine that you have. So you're kind of stuck with only purchasing those sheets, and they're pretty expensive because you buy them in packs. And if your school is similar to the schools that I've been in prior, when the green sheets show up, it's almost like there's a mad rush up to the front. And then all of a sudden, the order that you made for the sheets is no longer in order, because now you're making another order because someone has stored them and stuffed them in closets or in desk drawers because they're worried that they won't be there the next time they go to get them. So when you add up the cost of GradeCam compared to all of the green sheets you were purchasing and buying, it's no comparison. It's a savings overall. Then you add into what I'm going to call is the cost of time and the cost of the feedback. So when you use, and I'm not knocking Scantron, we just don't use it. But you know, when we had a Scantron machine, I always knew when it was test day, because at the Scantron machine would be teachers lined up, and all you would hear would be, oh, that kid did well, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Well, that sheet would go back and go to the kid. It had the pink marks on it, it had the score, but there was no other feedback with that unless you took those tests back and you did your own breakdown. So I think that would be pretty important. So, you know, was there a savings? Yeah, I would say we saved probably about $1,500 or so was a savings that we had, which is significant. And I know in the day and age of subscription services, that's tough because you've got to weigh the options. So for us, that's why we just said, hey, we're going to use GradeCam. You know, we're not going to have two different systems because I'm not going to pay for a subscription. And then for everybody that still wants to use what they've always used, use that. I just said this is your option. Like, this is what you have. And then there was another question that he had in there too.
Demographics.
The demographics. We have about 1,300 students. We're about 52 or 53% free and reduced meals. We are a very diverse high school. And I would say we're probably underrepresented by about 10 or 12% for our free and reduced meal students. And we are a city school.
Okay, great. Thank you.
It's important to note we are a one-to-one school as well, though.
With Chromebooks.
With Chromebooks. So I don't know how that factors for the person who asked that question, but we are a one-to-one school, so that, you know, and that does aid us and help us with the use of student portal and things like that.
Someone wanted you to just repeat what platform you use for your common assessments.
Previ. Previ.
Very good. Okay. And then is your school using printed bubble sheets instead of it doing digitally on the student portal?
We generally do a good combination of both. Of course, now we're almost using student portal exclusively for obvious reasons, but there are still a good many cases where our teachers like the printed bubble sheets and you know, use the rubric capture for things that they want in their hands, and they're able to scan them.
Great, thank you. By using the student portal for feedback, do students spend time reflecting during class to look at individual questions, missed questions, and determine what they need to do to relearn the standards?
Yeah, I think it's dependent upon the actual assignment and what the teachers have to compile. So I would say almost any assessment that's given in the student portal, that happens afterwards. But some things like exit tickets and practice problems more inform instruction for teachers necessarily don't, you know, it's not necessarily a reflection activity with students, if that answers your question.
Great, thank you. Here's more. There was a nice comment from someone that Scantron is ancient technology.
Thanks.
I think there was one other question here. Let me make sure I haven't missed it. Kind of going, I think we may have most of the questions answered that I needed your help for. Here's one more. Nope, I think we have answered those. So if you want to go ahead and continue, I'll kind of try to compile these and just to make sure.
So that's our contact information. If you have any questions for us, you can feel free to email us. And we appreciate everyone being here and the questions that you have. Like I said, if you have any other questions for us, feel free to email.
I found a question here. How many of your staff use the GradeCam credit assignment for non-graded work?
Oh, that's a tough question. I'd say roughly a third have probably used that feature at some point in time or another. There may be others. That's kind of I'd have to go back and really go through our school reporting mode, but I know of at least, I could say probably with confidence that at least a third of our staff has tried it or has used it.
We have roughly about 80 teachers in the building. And I think at the last check prior to distance learning, we had about 1,900 different assignments that were in the admin tab that I could go and take a look at. So that kind of gives you a picture of how often and how much we use it.
Great. I am also, Sherry, you had provided a question about Canvas. I'll definitely send you a note afterwards, but to everyone on the call, if you're using something like Google Classroom, Canvas, Schoology, you can grab a link in GradeCam to post a GradeCam student portal test within your other online tool. So I'll follow up with you, Sherry, there. Are there any other questions? I think we've got all of them answered. This has been terrific and incredibly informative and a great discussion back and forth. James and Chris, I appreciate your time. Those of you who are on the call who would like to follow up with them, please do, or follow up with our staff. There were a couple questions regarding custom standards, AP standards. If you're interested in having those imported into your GradeCam account, reach out to our support team at support@gradecam.com, and they can provide you with the information if you did not see that roll through the answer section here.
And Debbie,
the questions. Yeah.
Just kind of to with the AP, that was a good question about AP. We do mock exams, AP mock exams twice a year in our building. And our mock exams, every kid signs up to take at least one mock exam that they take during the windows that we offer them. We also offer them, they have the option, they can come in on a Saturday and take a second mock exam that they would like. We link all of our mock AP exams into GradeCam so that teachers can get immediate feedback. And that students can get immediate feedback. So that is something that we do as well. And it's, of course, we take practice AP exams. That's how we create them. And the first year we did it, of course, our AP students were like, I don't want to do this, it's going to hurt my grade. We had parents contacting us saying, how do I get my kid to prepare? It's going to be the Christmas break, and when you come back, you said they're going to give a mock exam. We're like, look, it doesn't affect their grade. Like, it is a mock exam. It's so we want to inform our instruction so we know where the kids are. We don't want you to, spend all Christmas break studying. Like, we've been teaching. We've been giving them the information. We've been in the content. We just want to know where we are and where they are, because we need a point. We need to have something, a data point, to have some conversation. And that was and that's just something that's evolved, and that's something that has continued for us. But we call them mock AP exams. Students sign up for them. We give them the allocated time that they would for an AP test, and they actually take a mock practice AP exam. But most importantly, they get the feedback back. They get feedback, which is great.
One last comment is, will this be put up on the GradeCam website? We will actually be sending this recording to everyone who participated. And we appreciate all of you for joining our session today. Look forward to our other content. Join us at our Facebook page. We have a great teacher group going on right now called Teachers Can, where we're posting weekly instructional strategies. We have something going on right now called Stump Kate, where you can send your tests that maybe you're not sure how they could work within GradeCam, send them and post them there, and we're actually helping you with those strategies and how to make that a GradeCam test. So thank you all. Have a great summer. We really appreciate you teachers and administrators, and you've been doing a great job through these last couple months, as you always do. Bye-bye.